Tune Review print speaking to the blind, celebrating 40 years of audio newspaper production. Welcome to this week's edition of the National Podcast, recorded at the Bishop Briggs Media Centre by our amazing volunteers. You can get in touch with us via Facebook, Twitter or Instagram using @TuneReview, that is @ CUEANDREVIEW. You can also contact us directly by emailing information@tunereview.com, that is INFORMATION@CUEANDREVIEW.com, or by calling 0141 772 3976. That's 0141 772 3976.
This is from The National on Friday the 3rd of February, from the news section. Campaign to secure Scotland's World Heritage Site enters new phase. This is written by Lucy Garcia. The campaign to secure World Heritage Site status for Scotland's Flow Country has entered a new phase, with the formal submission of the formal nomination dossier to UNESCO. A copy of the complete 250-page dossier and accompanying draft management plan, which makes the in-depth case for designating the 190,000-hectare North Scotland site as the world's first peatland World Heritage Site, was hand-delivered in Westminster by Dr. Stephen Andrews, the Flow Country Partnerships Project Coordinator. The document was received at Parliament by Heritage Minister Lord Parkinson and then submitted formally to UNESCO by Laura Davies, the UK's ambassador to the organisation. The milestone triggers the next steps in the bid process, which will see inspection visits to the region by UNESCO officials during 2023, enabling a decision on whether to award the accolade of World Heritage Site status taken next year. If the bid succeeds, it will ensure the continued protection and conservation of the Caithness and Sutherland peatlands that store some 400 million tonnes of carbon. It will continue to actively draw down CO2 from the atmosphere for generations and create new economic and cultural opportunities for the area's rural communities. Andrews, who coordinated the dossier for the Flow Country Partnership, a collaboration that includes Highland Council, Nature Scot, RSPB Scotland, UHI and Wildland Limited, said, "A vast amount of work has gone into getting the nomination dossier prepared for delivery to UNESCO in Paris. We are hugely grateful to both the UK Government and also the Scottish Government for the support they have provided in helping us reach this important milestone. We look forward to continuing to work with them, as well as with the communities across the Flow Country, to bring the bid home successfully in the next 18 months. Lord Parkinson of Whitley Bay, UK Minister for Arts and Heritage, said, "Scotland's stunning and ancient Flow Country landscape offers breathtaking views and is hugely important for protecting against climate change. It would be a worthy recipient of the UNESCO World Heritage Site status, and the UK Government is supporting the push for this international recognition to help ensure that the area is preserved for future generations." Environment and Land Reform Minister Mari McAllen said, "Scotland's peatlands are iconic and an integral part of Scotland's cultural and natural heritage. In good condition, they also play a vital part in our response to the climate and nature emergencies and our ambitious targets to be net zero by 2045. Peatlands do all this whilst reducing the risk of flooding and providing a natural filter to improve drinking water quality. That's why the Scottish Government is so passionate about peat and are investing £250 million to restore the 250,000 hectares of peatlands over a 10-year period to 2030. The Flow Country achieving UNESCO World Heritage Site status would help give us an international platform to promote the natural beauty of Scotland's landscape and the importance of restoring and protecting it. And I wish the best of luck to all working on this important bid. The Flow Country World Heritage Bid has been brought forward by the Flow Country Partnership, formerly the Peatland Partnership, which is a broad group representing a wide range of stakeholders in the peatlands of Caithness and Sutherland. Funding for the project is being provided by the Highland Council, Nature Scot, RSPB and Wildland Limited. If successful, the Flow Country will become Scotland's first World Heritage Site inscribed for purely natural criteria, and only the third for natural criteria in the UK. It would also be the first peatland site inscribed on the World Heritage List. The peatlands of Caithness and Sutherland only became known as the Flow Country when the Nature Conservancy surveyors began to examine the area in the 1950s. Flow is a term used in the north for any flat, deep and wet bog, and is derived from the Old Norse word floi, which in turn means wet or marshy. The Flow Country has never had a defined boundary. It most loosely takes in much of Caithness and northern Sutherland, but if the World Heritage Bid is successful, it would most certainly be put on the map globally. The bid, which comprises an extensive nomination dossier and a management plan, has been submitted to UNESCO by the UK Government, DCMS, and following a site visit, the outcome will be decided in mid-2024. That article was written by Lucy Garcia. This is from The National on Friday the 3rd of February, from the news section. Glasgow student stuns BBC Dragon's Den with bagpipe performance. This is written by Craig Megan. A Scot has stunned investors on Dragon's Den after marching onto the BBC show playing the bagpipes. Glasgow student Robbie McIsaac appeared on Thursday's edition of the popular show to pitch his Flux blowpipe product. The 22-year-old inventor from Falkirk was aiming for a £40,000 investment for the attachment, which absorbs excess condensation when playing the instrument. McIsaac invented the item when he was just 14 years old, having played the bagpipes since the age of 9. To show the technology in action, the University of Strathclyde engineering student walked into the den playing the traditional Scottish folk song The Braes of Killiecrankie on a 112-year-old pair of pipes. The Dragons appeared keen on trying the instrument themselves, with Deborah Meaden and Sarah Davies both giving it a go. But the Dragons raised concerns over the financial viability of the product, with McIsaac saying the product is designed to last a lifetime. The Dragons lauded the Scot for his entrepreneurship, and in the end he walked away with no investment. Commenting on his appearance, the Scot said, "Entering the Dragon's Den is an experience I'll never forget. I want to represent Scottish innovation and music as a passionate engineer, businessman and bagpiper. I knew the bagpipes would be a great emblem to represent the country. Although I didn't get the investment, all of the Dragons were hugely encouraging about my invention and impressed with the traction of the business, and my performance on the pipes too, giving me lots of valuable advice and optimism for the future." That article was written by Craig Megan. This is from The National on Friday the 3rd of February, from the news section. Royal Mail strikes 2023. CWU announce fresh strike date. This is written by Andrew Smart. Royal Mail workers have announced a fresh wave of industrial action this month amid a long-running dispute between postal workers and the heads of Royal Mail. The Communications Workers Union, CWU, announced the action when it served notice to the Royal Mail Group that it intended to strike. "We have served notice on Royal Mail Group for a 24-hour strike commencing for all shifts starting after 12:30 p.m. on Thursday the 16th of February. We cannot and will not sit back as they destroy our members' jobs." On the strikes, a Royal Mail spokesperson said, "We entered facilitated talks through ACAS in good faith, believing that the CWU was serious in their claim that they wanted a resolution." In announcing further damaging strike action, the CWU have shown that they are not interested in resolving this dispute and continue to focus on damaging our business further. The CWU's misguided belief that further industrial action will remove the need for change and force an improved offer is misleading its members and risking their long-term job security. Their 18 days of industrial action have resulted in £200 million losses in the year to date, cost our people around £1,800 in lost pay, and inconvenienced our customers. We need to agree on changes to make our business more competitive. That's the only way to secure well-paid, long-term job security for our people. In a materially loss-making company, with every additional day of strike action, we are facing the difficult choice of whether we spend our money on pay and protecting jobs or on the cost of strikes. We remain committed to talks and urge the CWU to withdraw these strikes for the good of our customers and our people. The union added that the vast majority of members will be on strike on Friday, February the 17th. Why are Royal Mail workers on strike? Royal Mail workers are on strike because of a dispute over pay and working conditions. The dispute arose because of the cost of living crisis and inflation reaching 11%. There are also concerns from unions about the direction of Royal Mail, including accusations that Royal Mail CEO Simon Thompson wants to turn the company into a gig-based one. That article was written by Andrew Smart.
This is from The National on Monday the 6th of February 2023. This is from the politics section. The headline reads, "Anti-Fascists outnumber patriotic alternative at Erskine protests." This article is by Mark Brown. "Nazi scum off our streets" and "Refugees welcome here" were the slogans ringing out in Erskine yesterday afternoon as anti-fascist protesters outnumbered an anti-refugee rally called by the neo-Nazi hate group Patriotic Alternative. The anti-racist counter-protest was called in opposition to PA's attempt to capitalise on some local opposition to asylum seekers being housed in the Mutu Glasgow River Hotel in Erskine. The counter-demo was organised by the campaign group Stand Up to Racism SUTR with the support of the local trade union councils in Paisley and Clydebank and the anti-far right organisation Hope Not Hate. The PA rally was originally coordinated with local group Erskine Against Asylum Hotel, which is led by Derek Stitt. However, after the neo-Nazi nature of PA was exposed in the media, Stitt sought to disassociate himself from the fascist organisation. Confusion reigned, however, when Stitt's group called a snap protest on Saturday, which mustered barely more than 30 people and broke up in disarray and recriminations about the lack of local support. Having attempted to deny that he was a racist who associated with the fascists of PA, Stitt went back on his word, putting out a call encouraging local people to join yesterday's PA rally. After all, he himself was seen at the neo-Nazi demonstration. In the end, the number of local people attending the PA mobilisation was low, as the neo-Nazi attracted more than 70 and 80 people. Many of the PA rally were well-known fascist agitators, such as Kenny Smith, a former election candidate for the British National Party, the BNP, and Kenneth McCourt, who has a history of involvement in far-right and racial separatist groups. The involvement of Smith and McCourt came as no surprise to anti-fascists. PA's neo-Nazi character has been exposed by Hope Not Hate, which uncovered photographs of PA Scotland activist Sean McAlonan posing with weapons and giving a Nazi salute. PA leader Mark Collett, another former BNP member, has recommended Hitler's Mein Kampf to his followers. He also helped to forge links between PA and the neo-Nazi Nordic resistance movement, which seeks to expel all non-white people from the Nordic countries. Collett has praised the NRM as ethno-nationalists who really mean business. PA's Erskine rally was heavily outnumbered by the SUTR counter-demo, which was more than 150 strong. Trade unionists accounted for a significant number on the anti-fascist side. Alongside the placards and banners of SUTR, the anti-racist demonstration was festooned with banners and flags from trade unions PCS, Unison and Unite, as well as a banner made by local people that read, "Erskine needs funding, not fascists, say no to Nazis." That was a sentiment echoed by Erskine resident Ian, who joined the anti-fascist demo along with 7 members of his family. "I believe it's right that we come down to show our support for people who have been shoved into a hotel, who have been driven out of their own lands," he told the National. Pointing to the PA across the road, he added, "We're also here today to protest against these scum who would try to divide our community." Ian expressed his disappointment that some local people had brought into PA's racist message, adding, "We need to stand up to racism of all kinds." Leading SUTR activist Pinar Aksu said it was unfortunate that we've had to organise a counter-protest against the racists and the fascists. However, she added, "It's amazing that we've had a lot of people coming joining our demonstration." Aksu said that hotel owners were making significant profits from Home Office policy. She argued that hotels are not the right place for those seeking refuge to be housed, and that they should be provided with decent quality housing within Scotland's communities. David, a local young farmer, joined the SUTR protests with a homemade banner reading "Refugee Lives Matter." He told the National that he has worked on his Renfrewshire farm with many refugees who had been forced from their homelands and who are themselves farmers. Refugee farmers' willingness to come into the land, to plant trees, to farm and repopulate land is fantastic, he said. "I do not see a problem at all with having better ways of bringing people into this country." That article was by Mark Brown. This is from the National on Monday the 6th of February 2023. This is from the politics section. The headline reads, "Ex-BNP official Max Dunbar slammed over Defy the Gestapo sign." This article is by Hamish Morrison. A man holding a sign reading "Defy the Gestapo" at a gender-critical rally in Glasgow has been condemned as homophobic and an idiot. The man, thought to be former BNP member and ex-Scotland and Union activist Max Dunbar, was filmed holding the sign at an event in George Square on Sunday afternoon. A video shared by Madeleine Warren showed the man holding a sign as he was heckled by women gathered as part of a demonstration against the Scottish Government's gender recognition reforms organised by Standing for Women. Standing for Women is a gender-critical feminist group headed by controversial activist Posey Parker. Warren said, "There were lots of us crowding around the idiot holding the Gestapo sign asking him to leave." The video showed a woman telling Dunbar, "I just want to say that this man does not speak for us. We're not against gays. The stupid man, we've told him to leave and he won't go. He's a man not listening to women. He's not letting women speak. Go away, you idiot." Dunbar can be heard saying, "I'm a member of the public. I'm entitled to stand here." Social media users on the pro-gender recognition reform side of the debate also criticised the sign. Comedian Janie Godley tweeted, "Defy the Gestapo" banner from the gender-critical crew, sending loving support to all my LGBT friends who had to witness this in Glasgow. Thankfully, the loud happy disco drowned their hatred out. Scottish Greens activist Ewan Ures said, "The man holding the Gestapo sign has been identified as Max Dunbar, formerly of the BNP and currently part of the UK A Force for Good, with the previously mentioned Alistair McConaughey Manky Jacket." Another Twitter user added, "I feel like if one side of the process has signs saying "Defy the Gestapo," that's the fascist, homophobic side." Dunbar served as the treasurer of the BNP before taking on the same role at the splinter party Britannica. We revealed he was barred from campaigning with Scotland and Union after his links with the far right came to light. Hope, Not Hate have described Britannica as essentially the core of the BNP Glasgow branch under a new name, which formed after a split with Nick Griffin back in 2009. That article was by Hamish Morrison. This is from the National on Monday the 6th of February 2023. This is from the news section. The headline is, SNP accidentally published Nicola Sturgeon's bank account details. This article is by Abby Garton Crosby. The SNP accidentally revealed part of Nicola Sturgeon's bank account details as they published her tax returns. The 8 documents showed the First Minister had only received her salary as head of the Scottish Government and as an SNP since she took over from Alex Salmond in 2014-2015. The FM released the documents with a challenge to Prime Minister Rishi Sunak to do the same, and later Scottish Party leaders Douglas Ross and Anas Sarwar at 10:30am on Monday morning. However, less than an hour after the tax returns were made available on the SNP website, the page showed a 404 error. After numerous journalists flagged the mistake to the press office, the web page was quickly deleted before 11:30am on Monday, when the FM held a press conference in St Andrew's House, Edinburgh. The FM's Bank of Scotland bank account number was visible on one of the 8 documents, despite being redacted on the rest. Sturgeon previously committed to releasing the information at a press conference in Edinburgh, where she told journalists, "Don't go getting all excited about what's in my tax returns. You're going to be disappointed on that." The SNP said the documents show the FM only has one source of income, her salary as First Minister, and that she only receives this at the 2008-2009 value. This means she donates around 20% of her salary entitlement back to the public purse, the party added. The FM told a press conference on Monday that she had published documents in a bid at transparency and urged Sunak, Ross and Sarwar to publish their financial information as well. She said, "I understand Rishi Sunak has said previously that he will publish his tax returns. I would anticipate and expect that he would do that. In terms of Douglas Ross and Anas Sarwar, yes, I think they should publish their tax returns as well. The reason I'm doing this today is I made a commitment to do it. Many of you asked me about it last time I stood here, and I think it does help with transparency. And I think the other party leaders in Scottish Parliament and indeed Westminster should follow suit." The web page was back up and running by Monday afternoon after corrections were made. That article was by Abby Garton Crosby.
From the National, Monday the 6th of February 2023, from the comment section, 4,000 words from Liz Truss. Here's what she says in just 4. By Kirsty Strickland. Column first published on Sunday the 5th of February. In an entirely unwelcome development in UK politics, Liz Truss wrote a 4,000 word essay in yesterday's Sunday Telegraph. We can only assume the former Prime Minister was being paid by the word, because what conceivable motivation would there be to put herself and the public through such a trial otherwise? Truss has never given the impression she's a 4,000 word essay kind of woman. It would be no surprise coming from other Prime Ministers. Boris Johnson's Tinder profile is probably a few thousand words in itself. Such a word count would require the meanderings and self-indulgent Blair to exercise restraint. Gordon Brown could easily fire out 4,000 words on how the next Labour government will definitely, absolutely, pinky promise deliver a federal UK that will strengthen Scotland's place in the Union. What on earth has Truss got to say at this point beyond, "Whoops, sorry I crashed the economy"? Instead, her essay can be summed up as saying, "It wasn't my fault." The only time we've ever seen her truly interested and animated about something was when she did the viral speech about cheese and pork markets. If the essay was about cheese and pork, then it might make sense. It might actually be worth reading. But it's not. However, if you set aside half a day to plough through it, I'll not include too many spoilers. Suffice to say, the former Prime Minister just wanted to have a bit of a moan, and her pals at the Sunday Telegraph helpfully obliged with a few metres of newsprint. The fact she was forced out of number 10 after only 49 humiliating days is the fault of everybody but her, according to Truss. She says she doesn't claim to be blameless before going on to explain why other forces were, in fact, to blame. One of the culprits she cites is the hilariously titled left-wing economic establishment, which is surely a contradiction in terms. She also blames her own party for not sharing her commitment to a low-tax, high-growth economy, as well as officials at the Treasury for their cowardice in not supporting her radical vision. Reading through it, you could be forgiven for believing Truss was some modern-day economic pioneer, and not the blundering idiot that she turned out to be. But we were all there, so we remember what happened. We remember the vacant expression in her eyes whenever she was asked a two-part question. We remember the excruciating 8-minute mini press conference she held after the pound crashed and she had to sack her Chancellor. We remember her defiance and lack of contrition at what turned out to be her final PMQs. It was a shambles, but according to Truss's epic essay, it wasn't one of her own making. Her piece offers a remarkable insight into the psychology of those who successfully climb the greasy pole to the highest office in the land. Self-reflection seems to be in short supply. If I made a mistake at work that had catastrophic consequences for other people, as Truss did, you'd never hear from me again. I'd emigrate. I'd change my name. The absolute beamer I'd get from letting so many people down would force an immediate self-banishment from society. But Truss seems quite relaxed about her many failures. She's certainly not embarrassed. Though she does accept her government could have communicated better during those turbulent few weeks. I'm not the slickest communicator, she wrote, which is probably one of the reasons she needed 4,000 words to say it wasn't my fault. I still believe that seeking to deliver the original policy prescription on which I had fought the leadership election was the right thing to do, but the forces against it were too great. Are you following her train of thought here? The bad thing that happened definitely wasn't her fault, but the thing that led to the bad thing happening was the right thing to do, and it was the fault of the people who were at fault for the bad thing. We stopped before it could get really, really bad. Glad we cleared that up. Horrifyingly, this mischarged comeback from Truss is only just getting underway. An ally of the former Prime Minister told one newspaper, Liz has taken a few months to gather her thoughts and is now ready to speak about her time in office and the current state of play. She has a number of scheduled media appearances coming up this week, as well as a speech in China that has been trailed as hawkish. This will no doubt be a headache for Rishi Sunak, but we can't take any comfort from that, because we have to endure it too. Have we not suffered enough? And that was a comment piece by Kirsty Strickland. From the National, Monday the 6th of February 2022, from the Culture section. Big boom for Glasgow students' bagpipe firm after Dragon's Den visit. By Jean Cassidy. A Scottish student and inventor behind revolutionary bagpipe technology has his sights set on the untapped global market for Scotland's national instrument after receiving a wave of overseas orders. Robbie McIsaac hit the headlines last week when he appeared on TV's Dragon's Den. The 22-year-old, who is in his final year of the University of Strathclyde's Bachelor of Engineering Product Design Engineering course, pioneered the flux blowpipe when he was just 14. He says the device could ultimately prevent respiratory issues for bagpipers, as well as preserving the instruments themselves. While still a schoolboy, McIsaac, from Falkirk but who now lives in Glasgow, was named the UK's most innovative young engineer by the Manufacturing Technologies Association, and he had gone on to land a series of awards and closed out the main stage after the Red Hot Chili Peppers at Tea in the Park in 2016. Since leaving school, McIsaac has grown Flux Solutions into a business that has generated more than £85,000, with increased interest and custom from the US, Canada, France, Germany, Australia and New Zealand, complementing sales in the UK. Speaking after his Dragon's Den appearance, McIsaac, who pipes competitively himself, said, "We have sold more than 500 flux blowpipes and had inquiries coming from across the world. Although now our biggest market is in Scotland and the UK, the business we've received from abroad is a reminder that throughout their long history, bagpipes have travelled to every corner of the globe. There are more than 140,000 competitive bagpipers worldwide, and 146 bands took place at last year's World Pipe Band Championships in Glasgow, coming from the likes of Argentina, Austria, Australia and Israel. When you can also take into consideration the number of people who play the pipes at weddings or parades, the opportunity for the Scottish bagpipe sector to succeed overseas is huge, and an opportunity I think is still largely untapped. McIsaac's revolutionary invention, which can be used universally with any bagpipe, has been engineered to remove moisture from the instrument. The blowpipe prolongs the lifespan of the bagpipes without having any detrimental effect to the sound quality or airflow. The device could reduce the risk of piper's lung disease, hypersensitivity, pneumonia, caused when the lungs are exposed to moisture and fungi living in the instrument. McIsaac, who attended Strathallan School in Perth, added, "Although bagpipes have existed for hundreds of years, there's always room for improvement. I'm constantly pushing to invent new products that challenge the ordinary and bring them to the bagpipe community." McIsaac works closely with the renowned Macallan Bagpipes, which manufactures Highland bagpipes in their factory in Kilmarnock. It also makes Flux Solutions products. Managing Sales Director and co-founder Kenny McLeod said, "Bagpipes are crying out to be updated and modernised. Robbie's enthusiasm for the project is inspiring and great to see. The future is looking very bright for him." McIsaac has been supported by the RBS Accelerator Programme and the University of Strathclyde Entrepreneurial Development Scheme. And that report was by Jane Cassidy. From the National, Monday the 6th of February 2023, from the Culture section, more than 100,000 people attend 2023 Celtic Connections in Glasgow, by Gregor Young. More than 100,000 attendances were recorded at this year's Celtic Connections Music Festival, which drew to a close last night. Performances from some of the world's top artists were showcased across the festival's unforgettable 30th edition, which ran for 18 days. It was the first time since 2020 that the Glasgow-based extravaganza had operated without COVID-related restrictions. It staged more than 300 events with more than 100,000 attendances at 25 venues across the city, from Glasgow Royal Concert Hall to the Mackintosh Church in the West End and Tramway on the South Side. There were also over 10,000 attendances at free events. The festival paid homage to the last 30 years and to the artists who have been involved with the event since its beginning, as well as providing a platform for future generations of talent. Highlights included a 30th opening concert, a 3-hour celebration. Rosin Reimagined saw award-winning Irish singer Muireann Nic Ambollig and the Irish Chamber Orchestra team up for an exciting new project. Another notable performance came from Rhys Kagona, the founder, lead guitarist and only remaining member of the mega-successful Zimbabwean rock band, the Bundu Boys. Maja Kashian completed her expressive voice with Finnish Cantel, which she performed along with talented accordion player and composer Andrew Waite. Malian husband and wife duo Amanda Bagayoko and Mariam Dumbai took to the stage with their blend of desert blues, Afro-pop, rock, disco and hip-hop, and Man of the Minch, one of the most exciting names in Scottish folk music, performed tracks from his debut album, The Tide is at the Turning. And that report was by Gregor Young. From the National, Wednesday the 8th of February 2023, from the comment section, Alan Smith, the Tories should think twice about mimicking Putin, by columnist Alan Smith. Only through shared institutions, mutual rules and a value-based approach to foreign affairs can states build and maintain the policy frameworks needed to promote democracy and human rights at home and abroad. The international community often functions as its own conscience to police the common values we laud. The horrors of war we now see from Russia's failed invasion of Ukraine have brought home very clearly the consequences for shared security when that collective conscience begins to fray through neglect, ignorance or malice. Countries that violate democratic norms and international law pay in consequences, either militarily, economically or diplomatically, with hard and soft power alike. Russia is now experiencing the might of heavy economic sanctions, diplomatic isolation, and the vast array of donated military equipment to aid Ukraine in its existential fight. A tried and tested method for maintaining peace and democracy across Europe is the European Convention on Human Rights, ECHR. Admittedly, not a name that exactly rolls off the tongue, yet it is a body of text which guarantees many of our rights today, rights which the UK government seems intent on rolling back further. In yet another pointless broadside at the EU, we heard talk this week about the Prime Minister threatening to once again pull the UK out of the ECHR. Never mind the fact that it's the Council of Europe, a separate body to the EU, which is largely responsible for enforcing the convention. It's once again the Tories playing to the far right of the party instead of actually running the country. But why does the convention matter? As the name suggests, it is an international convention with aims to protect human rights and political freedoms in Europe. Drafted by the newly formed states of the Council of Europe in 1950, the convention entered into force on September 3rd, 1953. The convention has several articles covering the right to life, prohibition of torture, a right to a fair trial, privacy, freedom of thought, conscience and religion, and several other rights which we would now consider basic and universal. A few years later, the European Court of Human Rights, ECHR, was set up to rule on an individual or state applications, with judgments binding on the 46 Council of Europe member states who have ratified the convention. Although it might be hard to believe, given the Brexiteers' rhetoric, the UK actually played a key role in bringing together this international treaty. As well as being one of the primary states which drafted the convention, it was also one of the first to ratify it in 1951. The UK gets a lot, and I mean a lot, of things wrong, but bringing together this international treaty across a war-torn continent, the UK actually did something right for once. Not that any of that matters now to the wailing Brexiteers. In seeking the purest form of Brexit sovereignty, it is not enough to merely leave the EU, but now they want to withdraw it from the convention, even though, and I cannot stress this enough, the ECHR is not the same thing as the EU. Given that Putin's Russia also withdrew from the convention last year, it's hardly an example the UK should look to follow. Yet it seems the UK government will press on regardless. A pet project of the, as of time of writing, Justice Minister and Deputy Prime Minister is the creation of a British Bill of Rights. Quite what additional human rights you might gain remains staggeringly unclear. The rights you could potentially lose remain staggeringly frightening. We should absolutely be wary of governments looking to minimise scrutiny of their international obligations, even more so when those promises include some of the most basic and fundamental rights we enjoy in our democracies. The UK government cannot and should not have carte blanche here, and if they were genuine about their desire to strengthen human rights, there is nothing in the ECHR which prevents the floor of standards from being improved upon. After all, withdrawing from the convention means that we will no longer be able to appeal to the ECHR. In the past year alone, this would have meant the UK would have succeeded in deporting migrants to Rwanda. In my own situation, I am part of a cross-party and civic group which is taking forward a case about the UK's failure to safeguard their elections and democracy by refusing to implement the recommendations of the UK's Russia report in full. Concerns over our removal transcend party. Many Conservative MPs have already voiced uneasiness about the UK government's persistence in this matter. For my part, I will continue to work with my SNP colleagues and those across the House to oppose this daft and dangerous course of action which may end up costing us all dearly. And that was a comment piece by Alan Smith. From the National, Wednesday the 8th of February 2023, from the comment section, Kevin McKenna, SNP will suffer as a result of gender bill, by columnist Kevin McKenna. When Police Scotland announces it will deploy its air support unit for a public rally, you're immediately transported into a realm occupied by Celtic and Rangers, or the Scarecrow, wing of unionism. Our National Police Force was dealing with a crowd of around 1,500, mainly consisting of women, who had gathered in Glasgow's George Square under the banner Standing for Women. A counter-protest by trans activists at the other end of Glasgow's most popular public space had perhaps piqued the police interest amid fears that there might be scenes. As it turned out though, the police presence was low-key, nor was this the hardest shift ever undertaken by our constabulary. There had been a brief skirmish at the beginning of the day when an elderly gent, carrying 2 women passengers in his rickshaw, pedalled slowly past the trans activists, bearing a sign that read, "Stop the lies, trans women are guys." A handful of counter-protesters began showering him with abuse before one woman launched herself at the vehicle in an attempt to get at the driver. The police gently ushered him and his passengers away, and peace was upon us once more. Several things immediately struck you about this happening. The Standing for Women attendees outnumbered the counter-protesters by more than 2 to 1. The entire occasion proceeded in a jovial atmosphere, and the big lad leading the singing in his drag in his drag gear at the east end of the square performed heroically with a string of foot-stomping pop classics. I thought he was different class, and when he began belting out Dancing Queen, I was thinking about having a wee shimmy myself. It was at the western side of George Square where the serious business was happening. Those there had all gathered to hear the feminist activist Kelly J. Keane Minshaw, aka Posey Parker, founder of Standing for Women, and a dozen or so others. The tenor of the day might indeed have been jovial, but the anger and bewilderment of these women was palpable. One after another they expressed their fury, always eloquently, often hilariously. I've been told they were bigots for believing that men can't simply become women by wishing it so, or in securing a gender recognition certificate. It was clear, too, that a feeling of jeopardy had been added to the bewilderment and despair. The placing of a double rapist in Scotland's only women's prison, and the refusal of Scotland's political leaders to describe him as a man, had given their anger an edge. It's probably accurate to describe this rally as a political event. As you moved through the throng, you were immediately struck by how few of those women were drawn here by party politics. Of the dozen or so I spoke to, most were former members of the SNP, and a couple were of no particular political persuasion beyond a generational loyalty to the Labour Party. All of them were united in their condemnation of Nicola Sturgeon, who they accused of betraying them and of destroying the landmark achievements of feminist progress. This was also the first public event I've ever attended in a professional capacity, where not one person I spoke to was happy to be quoted by name. The first woman I chatted to described herself as working class and from Castlemilk. She works in the civil service. I campaigned for the SNP for 20 years. I was at the SCCC for the big rally in 2015. I loved Nicola Sturgeon. I absolutely worshipped her, she said, and now she was crying. Why is she doing this? What happened to my party? Another woman approached. I recognised her as a former pupil of my old school, and so we talked about Celtic and how her brothers were doing, and she still kept in touch with some of her old classmates. She worked in the NHS and spoke about the opposition she'd faced in her family when she decided during the Margaret Thatcher era that only independence would protect her from the inequities of extreme conservatism. Can I use your name? I asked. I'd love to, but I can't be identified, she said. I'm in a senior post in the NHS and it wouldn't be good for my career if I was publicly critical of Nicola Sturgeon. Well, let's leave her out of it, I suggested. Yes, but even my attendance here would be noted by someone, she replied. Like all of the others I encountered, she was utterly bewildered at how the debate over trans rights had come to this. All of them expressed their support for the trans community, but not when their own rights to safe, women-only spaces were being eroded by the self-ID provisions of the Gender Recognition Reform Bill. They all expressed their despair at being marginalised within the party and labelled transphobes, simply for believing that sex is binary and that a fully intact male must never be permitted into spaces reserved for women. There were hundreds of women like these here, some of them also expressing anger that while each speaker detained instances of male threat and violence against women, they were being mocked by young people at the other end of the square. Being a woman is not a fetish, said another, who expressed disbelief that the words associated with being a woman, and thus their sexual identity, was being eroded. If our government can successfully delete everything that we associate with womanhood and target you for insisting on using our words, then they can get away with anything. The Standing for Women rally coincided with a Sunday Times YouGov survey showing that support for independence has fallen 6 points from 53% to 47% among decided voters. Those intending to vote against independence in another referendum rose from 47% to 53%, while support for the SNP dropped from 50% to 44% in the Holyrood constituency vote and from 40% to 36% in the regional list. It's still too early to say if the Scottish Government's handling of the rapist in Cornvale prison was mainly responsible for that sharp drop. But the universal feeling on Sunday at that side of George Square was that Nicola Sturgeon and the SNP have crossed a line with their conduct in the GRR debate. What should be more worrying for the wider Yes movement is that women from outside Scotland's political bubble have woken up to what GRR pretends for them. And they're resentful at being labelled transphobic for defending the concept of womanhood. The prospect of an independent Scotland seems further away than it's ever been in this generation. And that was an opinion piece by Kevin McKenna. From the National, Monday the 6th of February 2023. From the comment section, the controversial Scot who signed the US Declaration of Independence. Column by Michael Fry. The third US President, Thomas Jefferson, is often said to have owed his preeminence as a political philosopher in large part to William Small, his Scottish tutor at the College of William and Mary in Virginia. Jefferson, born in 1743, studied there in 1762-64, and, from the start, embraced the institution. He proceeded to qualify as a lawyer before launching his political career as a member of Virginia's House of Burgesses from 1769. The Revolutionary era was about to burst on the American colonies, but during the first stage, Jefferson did not appear to find his Scottish learning especially useful. On the contrary, when the rebel delegates called the Continental Congress to Philadelphia in 1776 and put Jefferson in charge of drawing up the Declaration of Independence, he identified Scots as enemies. In an early draft, he accused the government in London of sending out Scotch and foreign mercenaries to deluge the colonists in blood. Strong stuff, but the eloquent agitator could not get it past older and wiser heads deliberating with him in Philadelphia. The offending phrases in Scotland were taken out of the final text at the insistence of the Reverend John Witherspoon, himself a Scot and president of Princeton University. He was also a representative of New Jersey, the only clergyman to sign the Declaration, and one of only two Scots. Weighty figures such as him were not to be led astray by displays of youthful eloquence. Still, if these were the attitudes to Scots at the highest revolutionary level, it rather makes a mockery of the assumption in older generations of historians that there was widespread Scottish support for the overthrow of the colonial status. In fact, the sole prominent Scot never to doubt the justice of the American cause was Witherspoon himself. This radical minister of the Church of Scotland had been born in 1723 at Yester in East Lothian, a son of the manse. He studied at the University of Edinburgh. A fellow clerical student, Alexander Carlyle, remembered him as a very sensible and shrewd, but of a disagreeable temper, which was irritated by a flat voice and awkward manner, which prevented his making an impression on his companions of either sex. He was in Carlyle's view a jealous man, which made him take a road to distinction very different from that of his more successful companions. In other words, rather hostile to the powers that be in Scotland. Another student of the rising generation, John Hume, left a similarly unflattering portrait of Witherspoon during the Jacobite Rebellion of 1745. Witherspoon had, by that time, completed his studies and become Minister of Beath in Ayrshire. He organised a company of volunteers from the district to go and fight for the Hanoverian succession against the Jacobite army. In January 1746, he was captured while observing the Battle of Falkirk and imprisoned in Doune Castle. Witherspoon moved to be Minister of the Lay Kirk and Paisley in 1758. During his two pastorates, he wrote works on Reformed theology, seeking to blend it with common sense realism that was emerging as a mainstream philosophical school in Scotland. To his serious books he added a satire, Ecclesiastical Characteristics, and how the Kirk was being run by a clique of conservative ministers. The list of publications made Witherspoon one of the most visible ministers on the radical side of the Kirk. His reputation spread all the way to America, where efforts were underway to give Presbyterians a more robust organisation. It included a small college to train ministers, which was to become Princeton University in New Jersey. Witherspoon was invited over in 1768 to become its principal. The American colonies would then have a Scottish university in their midst, and, by the turn of the century, it was the most prominent in reputation and popularity of the pre-revolutionary colleges, later known as the Ivy League. Witherspoon became an active principal, teaching himself history, divinity, eloquence and moral philosophy. At a personal level, he grew much richer than he could ever have expected as a Scottish country minister. In 1773, he acquired near Princeton a country estate, Tusculum. George and Martha Washington often came to visit. Material comfort gave Witherspoon the standing to join in the controversies of the day. One was over Scottish immigration to America. The British government was not too keen on this, because it wanted to reserve lands in the West for indigenous tribes that had been its allies in recent wars. Witherspoon took the American view that, as the flow of settlers across the Atlantic Ocean grew, there were profitable investments to be made in territories such as Nova Scotia and New York, where the days of indigenous occupation were clearly over. By development, benefits would accrue not only to immigrants, but to the whole of our North Atlantic trading system. For similar reasons, Witherspoon favoured slavery. New Jersey never was a colony with a slaving economy, and did not legally free its slaves until 1865, largely because of his influence. In his time, slaves still worked on plantations, on country estates, on small farms, and even in urban businesses. As a citizen, Witherspoon was entitled to benefit from this, and he owned slaves himself. He publicly lectured and voted against the abolition of slavery in New Jersey. At the same time, he maintained a commitment to the religious instruction and general education of black slaves. The contradiction meant little to him. As trouble between Britain and the 13 colonies worsened, Witherspoon's commitment to the American side strengthened. An early publication of his was the Thoughts on American Liberty, 1775. The next year he published a sermon, The Dominion of Providence over the Passions of Men, again defending the American cause. He added to the published version an address of the natives of Scotland residing in America, urging them to identify with the revolutionary effort. Princeton became a hotbed of political radicalism. In his teaching, Witherspoon advanced a number of ideas that were about to become important in the US as the new nation drew up a constitution for itself. He argued for a revolutionary right of resistance, but recommended that government should be limited by a system of checks and balances. On religion, he taught that every human being, Christian or otherwise, could become virtuous, though only Christians might expect personal salvation. 9 of Princeton's graduates sat in the convention, which, at length, drew up the US Constitution. James Madison, who had studied under Witherspoon, was its main author. There was plenty for them to discuss in their teacher's somewhat eccentric collections of opinions, but revolutions probably need people like him. And that column was by Michael Fry.
The National, recorded on Wednesday, 8th of February 2023. News. DC Thomson staff facing redundancies as £10 million black hole looms. By Hamish Morrison, political reporter. Staff at a historic Scottish newspaper publisher are facing a wave of redundancies as bosses reportedly try to plug multi-million-pound black hole in the firm's finances. DC Thomson staff were informed at a meeting on Wednesday morning the company was facing financial difficulties and would need to slim down its operations, the BBC reports. The site said the firm was facing a £10 billion financial shortfall. The publisher's roster includes the Press and Journal, the Courier and the Sunday Post, and regularly scoops plaudits for its journalism. It also owns the Beano and other magazine titles. Headquartered in Dundee, the company's most recent accounts published online in December 2021 showed an £18.6 million fall in business revenues. This was accompanied with a £2 million fall in employee costs, not including £4.2 million in severance payments and a £4.2 million pension charge. DC Thomson confirmed the company would be losing some valued colleagues and that changes would result in the closure of some well-gloved titles. The company did not specify how many jobs would be lost or which titles would close. Rebecca Miskin, chief executive of DC Thomson's media business, we have today announced significant changes to our company, which involve the reshaping of our media portfolio and the simplification of the underlying structure. These moves are vital to set us up to thrive in the future and to respond to the difficult economic environment we are in. Our goal is to transform into a strong media business, focused on delivering real value to the communities we serve that can face the future with confidence and is equipped to thrive long-term in an industry which is changing at an unparalleled pace. The transformation strategy already in place was addressing these fundamental industry shifts, but the need to change has been massively accelerated and magnified by the current economic crisis. We will focus on specific connected and purpose-driven communities which enjoy the biggest potential for deep audience engagement and long-term growth. We're strengthening and building the skills that will be vital to deliver this. Unfortunately, we have also had to make difficult decisions concerning those brands and activities which sit outside these growth areas. We'll be announcing the closure of some well-loved titles as well as the cessation of some commercial activities. This will mean losing some valued colleagues, something we deeply regret. By Hamish Morrison, The National, recorded on Wednesday 8th of February 2023. The news. Rishi Sunak urged to apologise over damage caused by Liz Truss to UK economy. By Abby Garton Crosby, multimedia political reporter. Rishi Sunak said he was grateful to his predecessor Liz Truss when asked if he would apologise on behalf of the Tories for the damage she caused to the economy. The Prime Minister faced questions from MPs in the House of Commons on Wednesday as Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky visited London for the first time. Earlier this week, Truss penned a 4,000-word essay blaming the left-wing economic establishment for crashing the UK economy, rather than her tax-slashing mini-budget. SNP Westminster Group leader Stephen Flynn used his slot to ask Sunak whether he regretted Liz Truss's time in office. Sunak acknowledged mistakes had been made, but added his government had a clear plan to halve inflation and grow the economy. Speaking in the Commons, Flynn said it will be an honour for all of us to listen to President Zelensky this afternoon, before switching his question onto the previous Tory Prime Minister. He said, in recent days, the former Prime Minister, Liz Truss, said that she did not regret her time in office. Does the Prime Minister regret her time in office? Amid laughter from MPs across the chamber, Sunak replied, I'm grateful to all my predecessors for the contribution that they made to public life, but I can join with him in saying that I know the whole House will be looking forward to hearing from President Zelensky at the conclusion of PMQs. Flynn spoke of the damage done to the UK economy as he asked, so, on behalf of the Tory party, will he apologise for her? Referring to Truss's ill-fated 49 days in office, Flynn told the Commons, hold on a minute, let's reflect upon the damage that was caused. £30 billion wiped off the UK economy, pension funds brought to the brink of collapse, the pound reaching parity with the dollar, and interest rates for mortgage holders right across these aisles soaring. Now the former Prime Minister wouldn't apologise for the damage that she has caused. So, on behalf of the Tory party, will he apologise for her? Sunak replied, on the first day that I took office, I said that mistakes had been made, but what we have done is to ensure that right now, he mentioned the pound. The pound is at a multi-month high, borrowing costs restored back to where they should be, an economy stabilised and a clear path to halve inflation and grow the economy. That's what the Conservatives are delivering in government, and we continue to deliver as well for the people of Scotland. More to follow. By Abby Garton Crosby, The National, recorded on Wednesday 8th of February 2023. News. Sheku Bayo Inquiry, Woman Tells of Nightmare During Police Search. By Lucinda Cameron. A woman has told the Sheku Bayo Inquiry of her traumatic nightmare experience as she and her family were made to vacate their house by police officers who told them it was being treated as a crime scene. Sadia Rashid said police told her they did not need a warrant to search the property, and she was left feeling she had no choice but to leave. Bayo, 31, a father of two, died after he was restrained on the ground by 6 police officers in Kirkcaldy, Fife, on May 3, 2015. The inquiry is investigating the circumstances of his death and whether race was a factor. Rashid told the inquiry on Wednesday that 2 officers initially arrived at her mother's house where she was staying at around 8 AM on Sunday, May 3rd, and told her that they were looking for her brother, and they left when she said they were not there. She said that around an hour later, a number of uniformed officers came to the house along with one in a suit, who told her the family needed to vacate the house as officers were looking for evidence and had to search the house. The witness said no explanation was given as to why officers needed to search the property. Angela Graham KC, lead counsel to the inquiry, asked, "What was your response?" Rashid replied, "I asked for a warrant. He didn't have one." Graham took her through her statement to the inquiry, saying, "You say they said they didn't need a warrant, that we had to vacate now. They said we didn't have a choice and we had to let them in because this was a crime scene and they had to seal the house and search the house." The KC asked whether any explanation was given as to why the house was considered a crime scene, to which Rashid replied no. The witness said she explained to officers that she could not leave as another of her brothers, a paralysed war veteran, was in a wheelchair and she and her elderly mother could not move him on their own. And she also had 2 young children aged 2 months and 1.5. However, she said the officers did not offer any assistance and did nothing to help. She told the inquiry that she then packed in panic mode, feeling rushed, and later discovered she'd left things behind including breast pumps, expressed milk and medication. Rashid said officers told her she could not go back into the house to collect them. She said the family were treated with no compassion and the experience left them feeling like second-class citizens. Graham referred the witness to her statement to the inquiry in which she described how, during the course of the day, news of Sheikh had spread all over town, but she could not understand how this related to her family home. She told the inquiry she was not aware of anything that would connect Mr. Bayo to the house. She said, "What did Sheikh's death have to do with our house? Why were we being thrown out of our house? What were they looking for in our house? What were they searching for that could possibly have to do with Sheikh's death?" Rashid said she'd come to her mother's house for rest after an emergency C-section when her baby was born, and instead that day endured a traumatic nightmare experience that was uncalled for. And in her inquiry statement, she also said the family felt almost like we were being treated differently because we were Pakistani and Muslims. Asked by Graham what it was about the officer's behaviour that made her feel this way, Rashid said, "The fact we were Muslims and wearing hijab, we were quite vulnerable at the time. Had that been anyone else, they would have been treated differently." She said she thinks they may have been treated with more compassion if they had been someone else. The inquiry later heard from Rashid's father, Saeed Ahmed, who came to the house to help after his daughter rang to tell him what was happening. He said police initially would not let him into the house even though he told them he was a carer for his son, a former paratrooper who was injured serving with the British Army in Iraq around 2002. Police eventually let him in after some discussion amongst officers. The inquiry before Lord Bracadale in Edinburgh continues. By Lucinda Cameron, The National, recorded on Wednesday 8th of February 2023. News. SNP MP concerned about disinformation attack after emails hacked. By Adam Robertson. An SNP MP has said he fears he may be the victim of a disinformation attack as he claimed his personal email account has been hacked by Russia. Glasgow South MP Stuart MacDonald told the BBC he was targeted in a phishing attack on January 13 in the form of a password-protected attachment sent in an actual email account for a member of his staff purporting to be about Ukraine. After clicking on the link and entering his login details, the MP was redirected to a blank page, the MP said. When he asked the member of staff about it, he responded, "I didn't send any email." Several days later, the same staff member informed MacDonald he'd been locked out of his personal email account because of suspicious activity, and that he'd never sent him an email with the login page. MacDonald, formerly his party's defence spokesperson, said he is concerned about what may be done with personal emails that may have been taken from his account. He told the BBC, "If it is indeed a malicious state-backed group, then in line with what I've seen elsewhere, I expect him to dump some of the information online. I can expect him to manipulate and fake some of the content, and I want to get out ahead of that to ensure any disinformation attack against me is discredited before it's even published. It can catch people, even those who are alive to the threats." The incident came in the weeks after the National Cyber Security Centre, NCSC, warned of spear phishing attacks, which are targeted at specific people using tailored content more likely to deceive, from actors in Russia and Iran. MacDonald added, "This is a phishing campaign that was long planned and was targeted against me. I know it was targeted against some others also. Unfortunately, the hackers managed to breach the private email address of one of my staff team as well, so I would recommend to all your listeners to read the National Cyber Centre's guidance on spear phishing. These are more sophisticated than general phishing emails that I am sure all of us have received from time to time, and ensure you don't fall victim to it. It's a deeply unpleasant experience." A spokesman for the NCSC said, "An incident has been reported to us and we are providing the individual with support." The NCSC regularly provides security briefings and guidance to parliamentarians to help them defend against the latest cyber threats. This includes expert advice for MPs and their staff available on the NCSC website. By Adam Robertson, The National, recorded on Wednesday 8th of February 2023. News. Volodymyr Zelensky thanks Scotland during speech at Westminster, by Ross Hunter. The President of Ukraine, Volodymyr Zelensky, has thanked the people of Scotland during his surprise visit to the UK. During a speech given to MPs and peers in Westminster Hall, Zelensky paid thanks to all the countries of the United Kingdom for their support in the wake of Russia's invasion of Ukraine last year. He said, "The people of the United Kingdom, their honourable representatives, all the people of England and Scotland, of Wales and Northern Ireland, of all the lands which have been home to brave souls since Europe came into existence. I've come here and stand before you on behalf of the brave On behalf of our war heroes who are now in the trenches under enemy artillery fire, on behalf of our air gunners and every defender of the sky who protects Ukraine against enemy aircraft and missiles, on behalf of our tank men who fight to restore our Ukrainian borders, on behalf of our conscripts who are being trained now, including here in Britain, thank you, Britain. He later told parliamentarians that defeating Russia would be a victory of the very idea of war. We know freedom will win, he said. We know Russia will lose. And we really know that the victory will change the world, and this will be a change that the world has long needed. The United Kingdom is marching with us towards the most important victory of our lifetime. It will be a victory over the very idea of the war. After we win together, any aggressor, it doesn't matter big or small, will know what awaits him if he attacks international order. Any aggressor is going to lose. Applause also greeted the Ukrainian president's comments on holding warmongering nations to account. He added, anyone who invests in terror must be held accountable. Anyone who invests in violence must compensate those who have suffered from terror. He said that Ukraine's call for a special compensation mechanism, which will compensate war losses at the expense of Russian assets, is based on such principles. Following the address, Zelensky is due to meet with King Charles at Buckingham Palace. By Ross Hunter.
From the National, Thursday the 9th of February 2023, from the comment section, David Pratt, red lines in supporting Ukraine won't help end this war. By David Pratt, Foreign Affairs Editor. Time is of the essence right now in Russia's war in Ukraine. As Moscow once again starts massing troops for a renewed assault, signals coming out of Kyiv suggest a growing concern over the narrowing window to launch a counter-offensive in the spring. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky admitted as much last Saturday during his nightly video address to the nation. I've often had to say the situation at the front is tough, and it's getting tougher, and it's that time again. The invader is putting more and more of his forces into breaking down our defences, Zelensky warned. The sense of urgency with which Ukraine and its allies now view the developing situation was underlined again yesterday when Zelensky arrived in the UK in only his second known foreign trip since Russia launched its full-scale invasion of his country nearly a year ago. In an intensifying commitment to Ukraine's war effort, Britain has become the first Western ally to offer to train Ukrainian pilots on NATO standard aircraft, a move that comes after it offered Challenger tanks last month, ahead of the US and Germany. Already the extent of UK support is vast, with not only a massive supply of weapons and ammunition, but the training of around 10,000 Ukrainian troops in the last 6 months. And another 20,000 additional troops are expected to be trained this year. In fact, over the past few months, the range of NATO equipment being offered to Ukraine has massively expanded and comes in the shape of everything from infantry fighting vehicles to advanced missile defence systems like Patriot and other long-range missiles capable of doubling Ukraine's attack range. It almost goes without saying that this escalation in support has set alarm bells ringing in certain quarters among those who see shifting red lines among Kyiv's allies and weapons deliveries. Already weapons systems that were once considered off-limits are on the battlefields of Ukraine, and others are about to follow. Yes, the dangers here are obvious, not least of feeding into Russian President Vladimir Putin's decades-long narrative that this is now a confirmation of a NATO-Russian war. On the face of it, short of full-scale engagement by NATO forces, this is, de facto, certainly a proxy, war, pitting the alliance against Moscow. Admittedly too, there has been no lack of hawkish commentaries, with some Western strategists, intelligence agencies, hardline think tanks and senior retired military pushing for the comprehensive defeat of Russia. I say again, the dangers here are all too apparent, with the respective tit-for-tat response on both sides that arguably only deepens and extends the war. But what is NATO to do in such circumstances? Should it sit idly by while the Ukraine fights not only for its own survival, but fights too on behalf of the very security architecture that has sustained a largely peaceful international system since 1945? So many times now I've listened to some of these critical Western support spout the phrase that NATO will fight Russia into the last drop of Ukrainian blood. But try putting this to the Ukrainians themselves, which I have over the past year during the time I've been covering this war, only to find them dismisses it as nonsense. Not only are Ukrainians eternally grateful for the support given by the alliance thus far, but are asking for more in the defence of their land. They will tell you that this is all-out fight with Russia has been a long time coming, and, in fact, was ongoing for 8 years before Russia's invasion last year, and long before NATO and the West stepped up its current military support. Over the past 40 years, I've seen enough of war up close as a correspondent to know its horrors, and never for a moment would want to see any conflict and the suffering it creates endure any longer than it has to. But this is a battle the Ukraine and the West must not step back from right now. To those who talk of the dangers of crossing red lines and weapons supplies, I would say pause and ponder the alternative if Ukraine is not given the means to defend itself. If anything, I'd argue that NATO to date has been cautious, perhaps too cautious, having self-imposed red lines and weapons supplies that have fed into Putin's strategic approach, allowing him to pivot to a war of attrition with the aim of exhausting and fragmenting Allied support. I recall covering Russia's short war in Georgia back in 2008, when Putin did exactly the same thing, seeking to outlast any sanctions or Western responses to achieve a de facto victory. It was the same in Ukraine in 2014, in both the Donbass and Crimea, and now again, today, in seeking to deny Ukraine membership of the EU and NATO. There is no doubt in my mind that any claims by the Kremlin that it is open to negotiations is nothing but a mere stalling tactic, giving Russia time to garner its forces for the next mass assault most observers know is coming in the weeks ahead. I have no doubt too that if the revanchist Russia achieves any sort of victory in this war, it will inevitably lead to a wider conflict in the future. For the moment, Putin can still rely on support at home, especially from that older generation of Russians still smarting from Western governments' contempt for Russia after the end of the Cold War. The country's state-run propaganda machine also does its daily bit for brainwashing many Russians that this special military operation is still only that, and not a mass slaughter that in reality it is. It's all very easy for those critical of Western support for Ukraine to come out with glib accusations that backing Ukraine only serves to perpetuate this war. It's all easy also to proffer up the now familiar refrain that only the winners are the arms trade, though no doubt their profits are much improved this past year. But the inescapable fact is that drawing red lines when it comes to supporting Ukraine is meaningless in terms of political realpolitik. Controversial as it might sound, it's time to deliver the critical tools that can shift the momentum further in Ukraine's favour and bring as speedy an end as possible to this war. And that was a comment piece by Foreign Affairs editor David Pratt. From the National, Thursday the 9th of February 2023, from the news section, Edinburgh, teenage boy dies after incident in Holyrood Park, by Adam Robertson. A teenage boy has died after an incident in Holyrood Park in Edinburgh. Police were alerted to the incident in the capital around 5 p.m. on Wednesday, February the 8th. Ambulances and fire services were spotted in the area. Emergency services rushed to the scene, but a 14-year-old boy was pronounced dead at the scene. A Police Scotland spokesperson said, around 5 p.m. on Wednesday, February the 8th, police were called to a concern for a person incident at Salisbury Crags. Police and ambulance attended. However, a 14-year-old male youth was pronounced dead. There do not appear to have been any suspicious circumstances surrounding the death, and the report will be submitted to the Procurator Fiscal. A Scottish Ambulance Service spokesperson also confirmed they had attended the scene and that a range of resources, including one of our Special Operations Response Teams and Trauma Team, were present. A Scottish Fire and Rescue Service spokesperson said, "We were called at 5:26 p.m. on Wednesday, February the 9th, to an incident at Salisbury Crag, Edinburgh. Operations Control mobilised a number of resources to the scene, where crews assisted emergency partners before leaving the scene." And that report was by Adam Robertson. From the National, Thursday the 9th of February 2023, from the news section, firefighters postpone strike plans following new pay offer, by Adam Robertson. Strike action by firefighters has been postponed following an increased pay offer from fire and rescue service employers. At talks on Wednesday, bosses put forward a revised offer. It included a 7% rise, which is backdated to July last year, and another 5% from this July. The Fire Brigades Union, FBU, will now back members in the deal after more than 80% of members voted in December to back strike action. If industrial action had gone ahead, it would have been the first UK-wide fire strikes over pay since 2003. The union has said it will have an honest and sober discussion of the offer, which it says still amounts to a real terms pay cut given the rate of inflation. FPU General Secretary Matt Rack said, "This offer is testament to the power of collective action through the FPU. Last year we were offered an insulting 2%. The employers have now revised their position. We have achieved this increase because of the massive vote in favour of strike action by firefighters and control staff across the country, which made clear the strength of feeling among the firefighters about cuts in their wages." Rack added that the average firefighter had lost 12% of the value of their pay since 2010. He continued, "Frontline firefighters and control room staff will make the decision on whether this pay offer is considered a real improvement. Our internal discussions will be honest and sober. While the offer is improved from last year, it still amounts to a real terms pay cut." Meanwhile, plans to announce a series of strike dates in industrial action will be postponed, pending the outcome of the ballot. He added that the mandate for strike action by firefighters remains. And that report was by Adam Robertson. From the National, Thursday the 9th of February 2023, from the news section, "Former MP jailed for fraudulently funding cocaine habit," by Steph Braun. A former MP has been jailed for 4 years for making fraudulent expenses claims to fund an extensive cocaine habit while in office. Jared O'Mara was convicted of 6 counts of fraud after trying to claim about £52,000 worth of taxpayers' money for work that was never done and jobs that did not exist. O'Mara, 41, who represented the constituency of Sheffield Hallam from 2017 to 2019, went on trial for submitting fake invoices to the Independent Parliamentary Standards Authority, IPSA, between June and August 2019. Leeds Crown Court heard O'Mara made 4 claims for a total of £19,400 from a fictitious organisation called Confident About Autism, South Yorkshire. A jury found he also submitted a false contract of employment for his friend John Woodliff, pretending he worked as a constituency support officer. The former nightclub manager was cleared of 2 fraud charges over invoices from another friend, Gareth Arnold, for media work that prosecutors claimed was never carried out. But he was convicted of an offence of fraud, having emailing IPSA in February 2020, falsely claiming the police investigation into him had been completed, and he was entitled to be paid the 2 invoices relating to Arnold, which totaled £4,650. Prosecutors said the total value of the fraud was around £52,000, including Mr. Woodley's proposed salary of £28,000. Prosecutor James Byrne-Arton said the fraud was not a victimless crime and that it had an impact on other MPs because it undermines public trust and confidence in them. Mark Kelly, KC, defending O'Mara, said he wanted to apologise to his constituents for his failure to resign in October 2017 when controversial comments he made online about becoming an MP were revealed. When he felt he was being hounded by the media, whether that is the case or not, he felt under pressure from the media for certain circumstances that had come to light, Kelly said. He told the court O'Mara was an inadequate individual to cope with the stresses and strains of public life and resorted to taking drugs, alcohol and distancing himself in many respects from those that were around him. These circumstances were very difficult circumstances for him to cope with his particular disabilities, Kelly added. O'Mara won Sheffield Hallam for Labour from former Liberal Democrat leader Sir Nick Clegg in 2017, but later left the party after a series of controversies. He stayed in office as an independent MP but did not contest the 2019 general election. And that report was by Steph Braun. From the National, Thursday the 9th of February 2023, from the Politics section, FMQ's Roundup, Nicola Sturgeon warns Douglas Ross over gotcha trans questioning. Report by Abby Garton-Crosby. Nicola Sturgeon has told Douglas Ross to take guidance from his predecessor Ruth Davidson on asking gotcha questions over whether a trans person is a man or a woman. The Scottish Tory leader decided to focus on the transgender prisoner row and cases of Angela Bryson and Tiffany Scott for the third week in a row. Ross claimed that Sturgeon has been asked 12 times if Bryson was a man or a woman before asking the question again. Sturgeon said Ross's line of questioning showed he didn't understand the law around the Equality Act and noted previous comments made by Davidson. Ross repeatedly asked the FM if Bryson is a man or a woman, how they will be treated when they leave the prison estate, and urged her to publish a review by the Scottish Prison Service into trans prisoners. During the exchange, the First Minister told Ross that the cases of Bryson and Scott demonstrate how the SBS deals with different cases on an individual basis, and that there are established processes in place for dealing with sex offenders when they leave the prison estate, based on an assessment of the nature of risk. The First Minister added, "These are important issues. They are sensitive issues, not least for the trans community. As I said last week, and I've said before, the overwhelming majority of whom only want to get on with living their lives and never commit any offences of any nature. But I don't think Douglas does any service to anybody in the way he approaches this." I'm struck by something his predecessor, Scottish Conservative leader Ruth Davidson, has said. Trying to do gotcha questions about who's a woman and who's a man, I'm not sure helps, particularly for people in the trans community who are looking at the way this is reported. So perhaps Douglas Ross could take some guidance from his predecessor on this matter, and that might serve the whole debate better than the way he is doing. Ross responded by saying the FM had refused to give a straight answer. And that report was by Abby Garton Crosby. From a National, Thursday the 9th of February 2023, from the news section, Scottish tax and benefit system more progressive than rest of UK. Piece by Adam Robertson. Scotland's tax and benefit system is now considerably more progressive than elsewhere in Britain, a report has found. The Institute for Fiscal Studies, ISF, said that by April, the poorest tenth of Scottish households are set to have incomes of £580, 4.6%, per year higher than they would under the system in England and Wales. The ISF said policies introduced since 2017, such as changes to the benefit system, have particularly increased the incomes of poor families with children, while the average household income has fallen by £210. On Thursday, MSPs will vote on the proposed Scottish tax plan for the next financial year, which would increase taxes for higher earners. Reacting to the news, SNP MSP Kenneth Gibson said, "It's gratifying to see the IFS recognising the fairer policies implemented by the SNP Scottish Government, which are making a real difference to the lives of ordinary Scots. As the austerity-obsessed Westminster Government continues to hammer home the most hard-pressed in society, while dishing out billions of pounds in crony contracts to their mates, the SNP Scottish Government has again and again demonstrated its commitment to tackling child poverty and delivering progressive policies to benefit our poorest families." He added that the report represented a compelling argument for independence. "There is only so much we can do with the limited powers of devolution and a budget constrained under Westminster control." Among the poorest 30%, Scottish reforms are set to raise the incomes of households with children by around £2,000 per year on average, the IFS said. The new adult disability payment is forecast to increase disability benefit spending by around a fifth when it is rolled out. Research economist Tom Wernham said behavioural changes affect how much money is raised by higher taxes north of the border. He said, "The Scottish Government has used devolved income tax and benefit policy to make the system more progressive, as well as to raise more revenue to fund public services. These changes imply big increases in income for poorer households with children, but to fund their policies they are increasingly relying on taxing higher earners. With this group in particular, there is a risk that higher taxes will incentivise tax avoidance efforts, such as converting income into dividends, to which Scottish tax rates don't apply, or even migrating across the border. Most of the additional revenue from raising the additional rate to 45p is set to be lost due to responses such as these, suggesting there is a limit how much further this strategy can be pushed. If the Scottish Government does want to raise more revenue from richer households, it may need to turn to other taxes under its control, such as council tax. A UK government spokesperson said the income tax system is highly progressive, with the top 50% of income payers expected to pay around 92% of the total income tax this year, while the bottom 25% are expected to pay just 2%. The spokesman said, Scotland is part of the UK, which has a progressive tax and welfare system that balances the need to support low-income households, incentivise people into work, and manage the public finances responsibly. We have lifted millions of people out of paying tax altogether, while ensuring those who have the broadest shoulders also contribute the most. This has allowed us to update benefits and state pensions in line with inflation, as well as support millions of households with help worth £3,500 per household on average. And that report was by Adam Robertson.
That concludes this week's edition of the National Podcast. Please remember to subscribe to our channels at Q and Review and to tell your friends about our service.